Guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, August 4th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about a brand new swing state poll average from CBS News. They traditionally do these polls every few weeks between the main leading presidential contenders across a number of battleground states and average it alongside their national numbers. In this circumstance, we've seen a new poll, the first ever conducted for CBS News, with Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee, showing far bigger improvements from what we've seen in some other national polls or even swing state polls relative to President Joe Biden. Now, you might remember back just a few weeks ago, right in the aftermath of the debate. July 18th was the time that this article dropped, and we covered it around that week, in which the national lead for for Trump had grown over Biden since the aftermath of the debate. They did one immediately afterwards, and they found that 2 weeks later, Trump in fact started to do better. And it was around this time that we started to see increased calls on President Biden to drop out of the presidential race. For a long period of time, it was very much, is Biden going to drop out? And then it very much seemed like he was not going to drop out. And then more data points started coming in that was saying, wait, not only was Biden's situation dire early on in July, but it actually has gotten even worse. And so in the last poll they ever conducted on the national level showed Donald Trump with a 5-point advantage amongst likely voters, and amongst battleground voters, we see that lead became 3 points in these battleground states. And remember, this was a strong number for President Trump because nationally Biden should be doing better. In the battlegrounds, though, it kind of made sense. Donald Trump and Joe Biden had only really been investing in these battleground states. Biden was far out investing Donald Trump in these battleground states. And so it made sense that maybe we were seeing less of a push away from Biden across the battleground states rather than across the nation. But this time, we're actually seeing something a little bit different. But overall, very good numbers for Vice President Harris. And so the major headline here was, in fact, that Kamala Harris leads Donald Trump. We talked about it yesterday. The 538 average now has her up 2 points nationwide. Nate Silver has also been tracking the presidential election and the 2024 polls, showing Kamala Harris now for a lead for the first time in a while. We had seen here that leading up to this announcement that Biden was dropping out, Kamala Harris had been underperforming Biden in some cases, just losing to Donald Trump overall, and now for the first time, she leads him nationwide. And you can see that in the head-to-head polls, Kamala Harris has a 50-48 advantage. And so it's overall pretty strong for Vice President Harris, but these battleground states I think I'm most uniquely interested in because of the fact that in just around 2 weeks, they went from having Donald Trump ahead and in the majority to dead even with Vice President Harris, suggesting that as we get closer to Election Day, more and more momentum will move in favor of Vice President Harris. The numbers for Donald Trump and Joe Biden were getting worse for Democrats. The momentum was moving in the rightward direction, and Donald Trump had just, come into this in the immediate aftermath of this poll. We saw that he got to announce as vice president. We saw that he held the entire Republican National Convention, and also he survived an assassination attempt. So it was around this time that the entire race seemed to have changed, largely in the benefit of Donald Trump, whereas now the exact opposite seems to be happening. It seems as if Kamala Harris is starting to take down Donald Trump's advantage that he previously had, and maintaining this level of momentum between now into the convention and potentially into November. Now, it isn't just these head-to-head numbers that are the most important things that can explain the momentum. CBS News actually shows us some interesting crosstabs and differences between where we were when it was just Biden versus Trump versus Harris versus Trump. The most important headline here, of those who say they will definitely vote, the party breakdown isn't as interesting, but minority breakdown is more interesting. Still, though, Democrats, just 81% of them said they will definitely vote this November. Now, that's 85%. Republicans, on the other hand, 90% back on July 18th. Now it's gone down to 88%. A delta of 3 points, still in the advantage of the Republicans, but obviously on the national level, that still translates to a Harris advantage, Harris victory, compared to a 9-point difference. That was a massive, massive enthusiasm gap that Democrats have now completely fixed. Specifically, though, amongst minority voters, and specific amongst the Democratic base, the most reliable minority base for the Democratic Party, you are talking about black voters. And just 58% of black registered voters back on July 18th said they will definitely vote in this election. Now, it has skyrocketed to 74%. This is a massive uptick, a massive, massive, massive uptick across the entire nation. And specifically amongst black registered voters, this makes a tremendous impact on the enthusiasm, on the expectation and turnout. Overall, very, very strong numbers for Vice President Harris. And when you take a look at the individual lines of questioning that also, again, help explain that maybe this momentum isn't just short-lived. It is only going to get better for Kamala Harris as she has more opportunities to explain herself on the national stage, as potentially more debates pop up, as opportunities, more rallies are being held. There are so many different things here that show that Kamala Harris, as it stands today, as it stands where we are, has what it takes to move forward into November and actually do quite well. Because specifically amongst women voters, they ask, would their policies, referring to the candidates, help women? This is amongst women that are voting, potentially on this issue or not, but still very important for consideration. 70% of women say that Kamala Harris's policies would help women nationwide. Just 43% of women say Trump's policies would help them. 57% say they wouldn't for Trump. Just 30% of women say Harris's policies wouldn't help them. So she very clearly has a lead amongst women voters. You can see the gender gap is completely flipped. Men prefer Trump by 9. Women prefer Harris by 9. The good news for Democrats, too, is that women are the likeliest gender to vote. Women are also happen to be the ones that are more populous by a very narrow amount amongst swing state registered voters. And so Democrats, although we are largely seeing a 50-50 split overall, I mean, that's the way things work. Overall, right now, Kamala Harris comes into the advantage point at this, the 70-30 split versus 57 or 43-57. If we're using it in that same way, Kamala Harris easily demolishes Donald Trump amongst this metric. Another thing that I thought was quite interesting is that the big thing that Donald Trump, that he was doing quite well on whether or not, candidates were strong. And also, I will say, Donald Trump led Kamala Harris by 3 points in the last CBS News poll that was taken on July 18th. Again, 2 weeks later, Kamala Harris now leads Donald Trump a 4-point swing nationwide. You also have to see the same levels of questioning. I guess they don't have it explicitly shown here. But they do ask around the President Joe Biden's mental acuity. Does he have what it takes to serve as president? And over 65% of the nation, almost routinely in polls, their answer was no. For Kamala Harris, the same number says yes. Donald Trump, however, 49% say he does not have the mental and cognitive health to serve as president. 51% say yes. So now that we've talked about the age issue on the Joe Biden side, the Democrats no longer have it as a concern. None of their VP contenders are older than 70. None of their VP contenders are perceived as old men. On top of that, Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket is the driving factor, and she is almost 60, nearly 20 years younger than Donald Trump himself. Joe Biden, however, was 3 years older. So Democrats were looking at this race and saying, we cannot win on the age issue. We can't win on the cognitive issue, because both sides of the aisle seem to believe that their opposing party candidate does not have the mental fitness to serve as president. They no longer see that as an issue because even Republicans admit that Kamala Harris has the mental and cognitive health to serve as president of the United States. Otherwise, we would never reach that 64% number. And in terms of how people would describe these candidates, well, under Biden, these were all bad numbers. However, Kamala Harris does far better on energetic, far better on focused, roughly even on competent, might be losing on tough, but we have also seen that historically, when you're talking about a woman versus man matchup in polls, tough and more, it really just depends on which poll you're looking at, but specifically Hillary Clinton, same exact thing on things like tough, thick-skinned, non-emotional. These are the same types of things, same line of reasoning, why we talk about women face different levels of discrimination in the media and coverage when they run for president. Same thing with Vice President Harris. That can explain the tough one. The effective one is the only one I would say that Kamala Harris needs to really work on. Because I do think when we look at the effective number, people have not seen Vice President Harris in the presidential seat. She isn't the president of the United States. And so that comes into questioning about, whether or not she can make that argument that she was equally not responsible for some of the bad parts of the Biden-Harris administration, but also fully responsible for the good parts of the Biden-Harris administration. It's definitely going to be a messaging thing that the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris's campaign is going to have to do correctly. But I do think that where we are right now, these numbers, even if they are showing Donald Trump has, more of a description in terms of the word effective being associated with him, it doesn't translate necessarily to a victory because right now he's losing. And so there are so many other things that we can look at. They look at black voters, they look at minority voters at large, they look at VP, they look at everything else. They take a look at, third-party candidates included. Kamala Harris starts to see an increase there. You can see at the battleground states. In Michigan, they're tied. In Pennsylvania, they're tied. In Wisconsin, he has the slight upper hand. Arizona, they're tied. Democrats, I think, would actually be really happy about that. They lead now in Nevada, which is also quite interesting because no polls have said Kamala Harris leads in Nevada in a very, very, very long time. Now they do. And so many different metrics here. All of them suggesting that in just 2 weeks, Kamala Harris has turned around a 3-point deficit against Donald Trump into a 1-point advantage. And then also in the battleground states is dead even. And dead even is something that Kamala Harris, sure, is fully acknowledging, and I think the Democrats recognize this too, Republicans as well, that doesn't mean that either side of the aisle is on track for a very strong victory, but it is far, far, far better than where they were under Biden. And you can even see it in the betting markets. Predicted has only Wisconsin up and Georgia as well, and we can see that over time, the numbers have actually gotten significantly better for Democrats. For instance, in Georgia, around the time we were seeing Joe Biden have many calls for him to drop out, the numbers were getting worse. At his worst, he had a 21% chance at winning in the state of Georgia. Well, in Wisconsin, at his worst, you're talking about a 39% chance. Republicans were at a 65% chance if you were to take the percentages that way. But now Democrats have completely turned it around. This was leading into the debate. This was the day after the debate. And then things started to get worse. More and more fallout from Democratic leadership, from polling data, more metrics saying Biden was on track to lose this state. And then eventually, it got pretty bad. But then he decided he was going to leave the race. Skyrocketed for Harris. Better, and just within days, Kamala Harris took the advantage and today has roughly an 11-point lead over Republicans in the state of Wisconsin. That matters. In other betting markets, we can see that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are roughly even when it comes down to this election. We can see that where it was before, I don't know if we'll be able to pull up a tracker here, point being that it was far, far, far worse for Democrats, actually just went down a point, far worse for Democrats than when it was under President Biden. And we can see that in these battleground states, Wisconsin, neck and neck. Michigan, Harris in the advantage. Pennsylvania, Harris in the advantage. North Carolina is coming back. Arizona coming back. Georgia coming back. North Carolina even within potential reach for the Democratic Party. These battleground states and Kamala Harris's candidacy has been moving forward in the leftward direction and a positive direction because of the momentum over the past 2 weeks. Because today marks 2 weeks of Kamala Harris's candidacy. Something that has been entirely unexpected for the past 6 months, something that has completely shaken up the presidential race. But Democrats, with a combination of more excitement, enthusiasm, energy, whatever it might be, has started to see massive, massive gains on the overall net average, massive gains in these battleground states, and the momentum based on these consistent metrics, better amongst women voters, better amongst minority voters, better amongst all types of voters. That level has continued to grow since the day that Harris entered into the race, because only now have her numbers started to consistently improve. And even some of the better presidential projections show that for the first time in a while, that Kamala Harris takes this advantage. We can see overall, Donald Trump has maintained a very strong lead over all of his opponents. Expectation was 312 to 226. This is also what I had it after the presidential debate. But as we have gotten closer, and today, Kamala Harris now takes the lead. In this average, she starts to do quite well, according to Nate Silver, which has been actually pretty against Joe Biden, very much saying that he needed to drop out. Now Kamala Harris has the advantage in Wisconsin. Now Kamala Harris has the advantage in Michigan and is getting very close to being in the advantage in the state of Pennsylvania. We have yet to see a forecast released from 538. I'm excited to see their revamped, brand new national forecast, but their numbers and their polling averages also show exactly what we've known over the past couple of days, and that is Kamala Harris has made major improvements for the Democratic Party. And in these swing states, based on what we're seeing in all of these metrics and the momentum built from just 2 weeks ago, shows Kamala Harris is on track for a strong performance nationally, enough for potentially even a victory of 300 plus electoral votes. And that's phenomenal news for the Democratic Party, because Kamala Harris has single-handedly saved this election for the Democrats. And not to say that they couldn't have won it under President Biden, but it would have been tremendously more difficult than where it is today. And as more data is released, not only in the national level, but again, we can see it in some of these battleground states. Take a look at Michigan. Kamala Harris here has a 2-point lead. Biden was down 5. Take a look at Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris has a 1-point lead. Biden was down 6. You take a look at some of these states. Kamala Harris, 1-point lead, 1.4%, almost 2-point lead in Wisconsin, just based on the polls alone. And I know we don't say that this is everything, but exactly what the Trump team was arguing, the polls showed them with such a major advantage. Apply the same logic, Kamala Harris now wins the presidency. Democrats are now up for the first time of this entire election cycle. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.